Hello everyone, my name is Alltime, and today we're going to deep dive into the seemingly unexplainable mystery known as Deja Vu. What exactly is it? Where does it come from? And what does it mean? We're going to cover all of this and more, so turn off those lights, open your mind, and get ready to have your reality messed with. So what is Deja Vu? A popular song by Olivia Rodrigo? Nah. That popular movie with Denzel Washington? Not quite. So what is Deja Vu? A popular song by Olivia Rodrigo? Nah. That popular movie with Denzel Washington? Not quite. Deja vu is a French phrase meaning already seen. Deja vu is that feeling that one has lived through the present situation before. And if you're like me, when this happens, you say, Deja vu. Deja vu usually lasts between a second and a few seconds. It's a bizarre feeling of familiarity in a specific circumstance. Just as randomly as it hits you, it goes away. It's a difficult concept to explain other than saying, I remember being here before. I've already seen this before. We've had this exact conversation before. So instead, let's use a stranger example. A long time ago, you had a dream or a vision or a daydream about a blue car with a flat tire parked in front of a red fire hydrant. The thing is, dreams can be filled with tons of random nonsense, and this specific visual in your dream didn't really matter or stand out in the slightest. Only in retrospect did it make sense. When you wake up, you might not even remember it. But 2 years later, you're out shopping for a new shirt and you look to your right, and there it is. A blue car with a flat tire parked in front of a red fire hydrant. Deja vu. I've seen this before. In that quick instant, it all comes back to you. I've seen this before. And not just a vague, similar-ish situation close to this. I've seen this specific scene before. How? It's an overwhelming sense of familiarity regarding something that shouldn't be familiar at all. Maybe it's a place you've never been to before. Or a certain phrase someone says during a conversation with a group of friends. Or even the visual layout of a room you just walked into, like it was a photograph you saw a long time ago. The situations that can trigger deja vu, as far as we know, are limitless. And all of this is the mystery of deja vu. There are a ton of theories out there on what this could be. From the studies and information we do have available, we know that as much as 70% of the population have reported experiencing some form of deja vu before. And apparently, a higher number of deja vu incidences occur in people aged 15 to 25 than in any other age group. Until recently, deja vu has remained largely outside of the realm of mainstream scientific investigation. However, interest in investigating deja vu is growing among researchers of cognitive processes. So let's talk about some of the possible explanations for deja vu. The explanations for deja vu are divided into two categories: the more commonly accepted cognitive and neurological scientific explanations, and the more paranormal-leaning explanations. We are going to cover both categories, and once you have all the information, I'll let you decide what you believe. At the end, I'll tell you what I believe. Some have made the claim that deja vu is a side effect of psychosis, hallucinations, or temporal lobe epilepsy. But with so many affected by it who aren't diagnosed with those conditions, it obviously can't just be caused by those things. So far, scientists have placed deja vu into 4 categories: attentional, memory, dual processing, and neurological. Here's a quick breakdown of each. Attentional explanations for deja vu represent someone not fully paying attention, which is followed by a second look or a listen with full attention. Essentially, it's saying that you didn't really pay attention at first, but now that you did, it's as if you've seen or heard whatever's happening already. Memory explanations for deja vu make the case that you have already seen or heard something before, but forgot. And now that you've seen it for a second time, it feels familiar. Dual processing explanations for deja vu make the case that your brain, which usually works in a synchronous way, has temporarily or momentarily become asynchronous. For example, the part of your brain that draws familiarity and memory could pull at slightly different times, causing your brain to become out of sync. And lastly, neurological explanations for deja vu tries to attribute the effect to small temporal lobe seizures in people without epilepsy, or to a delay in information transmission between the eyes, ears, and other perceiving organs. These are the scientific explanations for deja vu. So what do you think about them? Honestly, I'm on the fence regarding them. I feel like essentially saying your brain messed up is kind of a cop-out. It's too easy. It takes a huge data set of billions of different kinds of people from all walks of life and conveniently smushes them all together for a nice and simple answer of, your brain messed up. I mean, we are talking about the overwhelming majority of humans who are experiencing this. Is it really as simple as a mistake? So let's get into some of the more paranormal-leaning explanations. And for those of you who feel weird about that word, it doesn't just mean ghosts and spooky stuff. Paranormal simply means events or phenomenon outside of the scope of normal scientific understanding, aka we don't know. And these are the type of topics that really interest me, because we don't know. Science alone that studies things that we know for a fact It's kind of boring to me. I want science that studies things we don't know. I want to learn new things. That's the kind of stuff that really gets my mind going. First up are dreams, which I feel is wrongly overlooked when discussing déjà vu. Dreams are defined as a series of thoughts, images, and sensations occurring in a person's mind during sleep. These dreams are a hodgepodge of visuals, sounds, and abstract ideas. There are many theories behind why we dream and what dreams are, but yet again, it's a science that we don't fully understand. One theory about the purpose of dreams is that it helps you store important thoughts and memories while getting rid of unimportant thoughts and memories, as well as sorting through complicated thoughts and feelings. These complicated thoughts and feelings are why we have nightmares, but more on that in a bit. Research has shown that sleep helps store memories. We know this for a fact. So just as déjà vu happens to the vast majority of humans and is deeply tied to memory, recognition, and familiarity, dreams are also the exact same. We have fragments of meaning and connectivity, but we don't fully understand why either happen. So is it possible that they're connected? There are some theories out there that certain fragments and instances of dreams are a kind of precognition, as though pieces of your dreams are glimpses of your future. In fact, one study pointed towards the idea that most experiences of precognitive dream could be regarded as a subtype of déjà vu experience. In fact, we have a word for this. It's called déjà rêve, which is a generic term for three things: the recollection of a specific dream, reminiscence of a vague dream, or experiences in which you feel like you are dreaming. Digging deeper into déjà vu's connection to dreams, this phrase déjà rêve could be more easily described as a memory or a feeling that you experienced in a dream happening again in the real world. In fact, one study in 2010 found that up to 95% of people might have experienced déjà rêve in the past. Now we're getting somewhere. The connection between dreams, déjà vu, and déjà rêve are obvious. But what about nightmares? Do they come into this? Absolutely. Most have probably heard of a story of someone having a nightmare and it coming true. As wild as this sounds, it isn't as unique an experience as you might think. The dread of failing a test, and then it happens in real life. The feeling that a loved one has died only to find out they passed away while you slept. Dreams and nightmares are one and the same, one being positive or abstract, and the other being terrifying. It's a mixture of your mind solving problems, recuperating, and dealing with trauma. As interesting and as strange as the phenomenon that dreams and nightmares sometimes predict the future, thus causing déjà vu or déjà rêve in the real world, obviously science completely disagrees. So what do the experts say? Most likely, this is due to coincidence or bad memory. This sounds like the Mandela effect all over again, huh? Where when you look up the Mandela effect, the first and most prevalent result on Google is false memory. You just remembered it wrong. It's just bad memory. I could rant about this outright dismissive and incurious take for days, but I'll save that for another time. Let's talk about what I consider to be the biggest revelation of all, and that is remote viewing. Now, before you roll your eyes, let's break down what remote viewing is and how it's all potentially connected. Remote viewing is considered as pseudoscience, as in it's unproven, difficult to replicate, and by most scientists, not true. Now, if you look past all of those scary labels, you'll see that remote viewing is defined as seeking impressions or information about distant or unseen targets. Put simply, you are seeing locations, people, places, etc. using only your mind. For example, let's say that I have a number of photographs of different locations at my disposal that you have never seen before. Each of these photographs are assigned a specific number, and I've chosen one of these photos to be your target. I'll give you a blank piece of white paper and a number that corresponds to that specific photograph. Now, using that number, you as the remote viewer would, after a period of time, see the location corresponding with the number, and you would draw it out for me as best you could. Now, I get that this sounds absolutely ridiculous, like science fiction, but here's the thing. People have done it. And the craziest thing is that this isn't dependent on some special ability or psychic powers or anything like that. Anyone can do it. There is a free app on your phone you can download called RV Tournament. And no, I'm not sponsored by them, I just think it's interesting. You're given a number and a place to draw. Now, while you meditate, or you think, or you go into a trance, or whatever you do, you're trying to see the future. You draw it out, and once you're finished, you submit the drawing. Now, once you've submitted it, you can't change it anymore. And afterwards, you are shown two photos with a slider to help you decide which photo was your correct target. The real target is revealed the next day. I'm terrible at it for sure, but on my first attempt, I did something really interesting that blew my mind. As you can see, I had no idea what I was doing. This was my first sketch, but I did miraculously see and draw the sliding scale to the right. Pardon the crude scribbles, but that is unquestionably the sliding scale, an object that is impossible to see until you submit your drawing. So how did I see that and draw that? Remember, this is the first time I did this, so I had no idea there was a sliding scale to pick which picture was correct. I just saw it and I drew it. I had no idea that it was there before my first remote viewing, And that goes right into my next point. It turns out there is a fun secret to remote viewing that isn't talked about outside of the communities of people who do remote viewings. And that secret is that you aren't magically seeing the future. You aren't seeing that location. What you're doing is you're viewing yourself in the future, looking at the results. So you in the past are trying to see what you in the future are seeing. So in the future, you study it really hard, burn it into your brain so that in the past you'll see it. So now my story is going to make perfect sense. The fact that I was so blown away that I drew the sliding scale without ever having seen it before in the future caused my brain to focus so much on that detail that through the remote viewing, I drew that detail in the past. Literally, I made such a big deal about it in the future that it burned into my brain so that when I drew it in the past, that's what I drew. What? Believe it or not, this is what happened, and I'm excited to see what happens with you. So let's elaborate on this further and then bring together all the details. If I give you the number 1734, and unknown to you, that number corresponds with a picture of a volcano, you aren't magically viewing a volcano. What you're actually doing is you are fulfilling a time paradox of your own creation caused by a causal loop. A causal loop is when a future event is caused by a past event, which in turn creates a future event. Let's make this explanation even more simple. You are in the future, and you're going to look at a photo of a volcano and the number 1734. You study every detail of it. Every line, every color, every tiny little detail, every aspect. Now as you study this volcano, you also keep repeating to yourself the number 1734. The idea is that you're tying this visual and this number together. You're burning them together into your memory. The goal of doing all of this in the future is to make seeing it in the past easier. Now in the past, as you stare at the number 1734, if in the future you studied it properly, you'll see lines, shapes, details, colors that make out a volcano, and you'll draw it out. The better you are at studying in the future, the better you'll see it in the past. Now I get it, all of this sounds absolutely ridiculous. Remote viewing is looked upon with extreme prejudice and disdain. It's extremely hard to replicate, which is fundamental to the scientific method. So you can see why science isn't that big of a fan. But then tell me, why did the CIA run a program for 17 years, from 1978 to 1995, explicitly to understand, replicate, and utilize remote viewing? In fact, tens of millions of dollars were spent on this. You can find all kinds of declassified reports on this stuff. Look it up, it's a fantastically interesting read. Everything from how to do it, who was trained, who was best at it, and all of the kinds of things that they saw. Maybe it's all disinformation and it's a bunch of nonsense, but then again, it was classified for many, many years, so who really knows? Anyway, why do I bring all of this up? Well, I believe that remote viewing and deja vu are one and the same. The only difference is remote viewing is intentional, and deja vu seems to happen randomly. You're seeing something in the present that you've sworn you've seen before in the past. I think the only real difference between them is intentionality. Remote viewing is really hard to do, just as deja vu is extremely random. Intentionality is the difference. So in my opinion, deja vu is the profound realization that you've seen this before. And that profound realization that you've seen this before is what makes that memory significant to you. Because it is so profound in that moment, it is burned into your brain as something important. As I said before, it is a causal loop, a time paradox. That profound moment in the future is what creates the initial imprint, which you somehow see in your dreams or nightmares in the past through incidental or accidental remote viewing. Then, as the future becomes your present, you see it again, the initial spark is set once again, deja vu. It's all connected, or at least that's my theory. What about you? What's your take on all this? Have you ever experienced deja vu before? And if you have, tell me all about it in the comments below. I'd love to hear your experiences. Also, what do you think about remote viewing? As far out there as it sounds, I recommend everybody give it a try, even just for fun. Who knows, maybe you actually see something. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I got a little weird, but hey, that's what we do on All Time Scary. Like the video if you liked this, and subscribe if you loved it. Until next time, never stop searching.